In the part 1 and 2 video of Tableau Desktop and Tableau Public Introduction, we discussed acquiring USGS data and then also importing that data and creating a simple table visualization within Desktop. In this third part, we're going to finalize the presentation with geospatial data, specifically the same data set that we've been working with, but using latitude and longitude, and then uploading all this to Tableau Public. So in this third part, what we want to do is we want to really understand how to work with latitude and longitude to actually create mapping within Tableau. We want to understand tooltips, proportional symbolization, and creating a field calculation. And we want to bring all that into what's called a dashboard. So we're going to create a dashboard. And then once the dashboard's created, we're going to point to a Tableau Public instance. So we're assuming here that we have a login already set up for Tableau Public, and we're going to publish that workbook, and that's going to allow us to have a shareable either embed or specific URL to the visualization itself. So to get started, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to point to the part 1 and 2 workbook. So remember I called it book 1. So if I just click on it and open it up, it's going to open up exactly where I left off. So I had a first sheet and we were creating a text table here and binning out the data into what's 4 bins here. So what I want to do now is I want to create a second sheet. So this particular visualization stays within its own sheet, sheet 1, and I'm going to create a new sheet. So I go down to the lower right-hand corner and I'm going to create a new worksheet. So this is just going to be called sheet 2. And what I want to do now is I want to work with 2 columns that denote geography, in this case latitude and longitude. And the way that this works is we're going to use columns and rows for latitude and longitude. And so for the row, we're going to place latitude, so that goes into rows. And for longitude, we're going to bring that up into columns. And as I do that, it's just going to place 1 point. Okay, so it's just going to place 1 point, which is just kind of an aggregation of all our points, which is obviously not the visualization that we want. But it's setting up to get to the actual visualization that we want. And so what we need to do here is we need to specify some distinct attribute within our data that would break out the aggregation that happens with columns and rows across latitude and longitude for our data set. So what would make sense is something like place, because place is unique to each one. It's a nice descriptor. Let's go ahead and place that. And where we're going to place that is into marks. So we just bring place into marks. And as soon as I do that, we can see that it now utilizes each one of those place attributes to distinguish latitude and longitude for each point. And if I do a rollover, this is what's called a tooltip here. So we can see now that we have columns and rows and places displayed on our tooltip. Those are the 3 attributes that I've placed within my sheet. Place in marks, and then columns gets longitude, rows gets latitude. So in addition to the actual points representation via place, we may want to actually see a proportion in size. And so that would be magnitude. So we want to see the size change of our symbolization of dots based on the magnitude. So what we would do here is we're going to drag magnitude into place. So it comes in, it doesn't do anything. But importantly, we're not interested in summing the magnitude. We're interested in either the minimum or the maximum value. Okay, so we don't want to average or median. We want it to actually point to that particular value that's sitting in that record. So we can use maximum or minimum. So in this case, we'll use maximum. And then what we want to do is we want to take this magnitude and push it to size. So here we click on size, and then all of a sudden you can see the dots actually change size. The problem here is that it's not changing the size significantly relative to each of the different magnitudes. And that's because the magnitudes aren't particularly wide in terms of a distribution, right? So here, if we can see that there's a difference in size between this one and this one. So if we roll over here, we can see the magnitude is 4.7. And here it's 2.9. So here we see a little bit of difference. But what we want to do is we really want to push the visualization to actualize the proportional symbolization better than it's currently doing. So we want to see smaller circles and larger circles representing the array of values for magnitude. So the way that we can do this is we can actually create in our data source, in our CSV table, a new record, or a new column, I should say. So under data, we can go into our magnitude, and we can do this little drop down right here, and we can say create a calculated field. And here what we can do is we can just do math within the table and create a new field. So we can see the calculation is valid currently. It's just pointing to magnitude. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say magnitude to the power of, okay, so in this case, let's make it to the power of 10. So I'll do to the power of 10. And it will correct my calculation, or at least tell me that it's wrong until it's right. So the power of 10. Okay, it likes that validation. And it's going to create a new field called calculation 1. Okay, that's fine. We'll just call it calculation 1. It's going to stick it at the end. So we'll say OK. And oh, I'm sorry, it sticks it right next to magnitude. So here's magnitude, and then it's power of 10. You can see these numbers are huge now. But what's important is the array between the 4.1 and the 4.9, or the 4.1 and the 4.3, is significant enough for proportional symbols to really exercise that number to show a range of sizes. So let's go back to sheet 2 now. And what we're going to do is we're going to take maximum magnitude, and we can keep that in tooltips right now. So let's get rid of that. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to go into calculation 1, and let's drop in calculation 1 on size. And now we can see, although overall the circles are slightly smaller, importantly, there's a difference in range between the biggest and the smallest. Okay, what's important is that the calculation in the tooltip is not of value to us. That number doesn't really mean a whole lot to us. We're just forcing the actual symbolization itself. And what I can do is I can also click on size and make these a little bit larger if I want to, which I think I want to do. Okay, so you can change the size under size tab. You can also change the color. So in here I just have the default blue. If I want to go to color, and let's say maybe I want to make a black dot and maybe have a border that's going to be a white color. Okay, kind of bounce off the gray background just a little bit. And I'll make the opacity a little bit less. So these dots that are overlapping each other will show up a little bit better. So with opacity of it about 40%, you can see that the small dot overlapping the larger dot here, we can see those two decently. So I'll kind of zoom out just a little bit. I can use my tool right here at the bottom, this pointer, to move it around and get it to, that looks pretty good because this really shows up at one of the larger quakes, and the transparency really works well here. So this clumping that's going on, the transparency really helps that out. Now what I want to do is I really don't want to see in calculation that number under the tooltip. So what I can do for tooltips is I can click on tooltip and open that up now, and I can start to make changes here. Let's go ahead and also add in the magnitude, because I do want the magnitude to show up in the tooltip. So I'm going to click on magnitude, but I want to see just one value, which would be the maximum. Now I'm going to go back to tooltip, and I can see max value. So I'm going to point it to max value, but I'm just going to call it magnitude. And I'm going to get rid of the calculation 1 altogether because I'm just using that for visualization purposes. I'm not using it as any particular quantitative piece of information that's meaningful. And I can make the Tableau, I can change the text style, the font, I can change the size of it. I'll just leave those as default and say OK. Now when I roll over it, I get a latitude and longitude, my magnitude, and I also get a place. So those are the 4 components that I really want for my final visualization. Okay, so we're very close to being ready to produce the final visualization. So what we have now is we have our data source. We have a new field that we created called calculation 1. We have a sheet 1, which is our original text table. We have a sheet 2, which is now our visualization. And I can kind of play with it a little bit to get it right at the scale that I would like. So I don't want to cut off any of the earthquakes, but I also don't want to be too far away or too, quote, zoomed out or too small scale to not show these at maximum benefit. That looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is I have everything the way that I like it. I'm going to go to File and do a Save, or Save As, either which one. And then I'm going to create a new dashboard. So this is not a new worksheet. This is lower left-hand side, but a new dashboard. So I click on New Dashboard, and it gives me the space to actually create the final visualization. And under Layouts, we have some options, padding, inner paddings. I'm not going to get too detailed in here. You can work with backgrounds. You can get the size, width, and height exactly positioned. I'm just going to use some helpers here that say the size of it is going to be, like I got drop down here. I can just do a full screen 1024 by 768. That's pretty standard. So I'll just use a full screen for a browser. Okay, so the width is going to be this, the height is going to be this. And this is my sort of workspace here. This is where we start dropping in sheets. So the first thing I want to do is drop in sheet 2, which is my geovisualization. So I go to dashboard 1 and put in sheet 2. And they show up over here on the left-hand side. So here's where we drag them, not from the bottom, but from the side here. So sheet 2 comes in. And as it comes in, it does two things. It drops it in the visualization, but then also it gives us a default legend. The problem with this particular legend is that although it's nice to have the proportional symbolization, the calculation itself, as we discussed, is not particularly meaningful. So I'm just going to get rid of this altogether. So I just click it out and say, delete that container altogether. So here's my visualization here. And what's nice is I have some negative space right here in which to bring in sheet 2. So here I have my tooltips. Those are all working well. I have nice symbolization. I can see the various sizes of the earthquakes. I can see where they're overlapping and where the concentrations of the earthquakes are, so I can show a spatial pattern. And importantly, I can change the title. So if I click on sheet 2 and edit the title, here's where I would want to put in something like a naming. So I might say a thematic naming. So I might want to say something like earthquake locations and magnitudes. Then I probably want to put a date range in. I'm just going to call it date right now. And then location description. So for a location description, I might want to put in something like west coast of South America, or countries that are included, however you want to describe it, and say OK. So that gives us the actual title up here at the top. That's all great. That's where we change the title around. Let's go ahead and drop in sheet 1 now. So sheet 1 comes in, and sheet 1 now breaks the space in half, which is not what I want. What I can do now is I can do a right click in this space and just push it to floating. So click on floating, and floating makes it within another sheet container. So this is floating on top, and I can also specify floating order. So I would want this one to be in front. I'm going to use the negative space sitting over here by which to place this sheet. And I have some options here in terms of fitting, so I can fit it to the width, to the height, to the entire view. I'm just going to keep it standard for right now, and that works out pretty well for me. I don't really like the naming here and the titling, so what I might want to do for sheet 1 is edit the title and give this little text helper, text table helper. It's not really a legend. It's just it's showing us the data in terms of the bins. I might want to just call this magnitude, and then call it count. Okay. And I probably want to change the font size here. So the way that I would do that is just highlight the text and go to the font size. Maybe make that 11. I guess we'll go back to 10. Sorry about that. Not with the 14. I don't want that. Let's try 11. Okay, that's good. mag bin is not particularly descriptive for a final visualization, so I might just want to take this out. And the way that I can do that is I can right-click on it and go hide field labels and rows. Be careful when you do this. It's hard to recover from this particular action, I find. So if you want to get rid of this, just know that it's going to be hard to go back without dropping in the sheet altogether again. Okay, so I'll hide that. And then I can place this. You just got to be careful when you're clicking around here is that you don't want to mess with your table on the inside too much. If you want to be dragging your table around, you use this. There's a little holder right up here at the top that you can drag it around with. And then you can change the size of it on the edge by dragging it in and out like that. All right, so I'm going to position this about where I want it. Something like that looks pretty good to me. I might move this over just a little bit. This is the fine tuning. Now you can go in and you can actually do a fair amount of editing here. So under more options, you have different things that you can do. But I'm pretty happy right now for demonstration purposes with what we have here. So now it's essentially time to publish this. So what we would do is we would go to File and make sure that we're saving. So everything's saved as the compressed Tableau workbook in the package, and we're going to get ready to actually publish. So the way that we publish is under Server, we're going to point to Tableau Public and save to Tableau Public as. Now here's the key is that we're assuming that we are under Tableau Public, signed in, logged in, signed up, the whole thing. So what's going to happen is you need to sign up, get an email, activate via email, and then actually do your sign in. So I'm just going to pause the video for a second and sign myself in. Okay, so I'm currently signed into Tableau Public, and if we look under the profile, we can see that we have 10 gigabytes of space, which is a lot for making these visualizations. So you can make quite a few of them without hitting any pay steps. Okay, so again, Tableau Public, we're using the free version here. Okay, so once we're logged in, we can go back to desktop and we can point it to Tableau Public. So I'm going to go to Server as Tableau Public, save to Tableau Public as, and I'm going to save it. Probably want a meaningful title. I'm just going to call it Book 1 for now and save it. And it should send it directly to your current login. Now, if you're having issues with making the connection, you can, under Tableau Desktop here, actually manage your profile. Here it's going to see me currently signed in. So it's looking for you to be signed in a browser on the same machine and having internet access. But if you need to, you can go back to the server and make sure that you're signed in here. So I can sign in and then go ahead and push to Tableau Public. So the key is that it wants to see you signed in. So what we want to do now is we want to just go ahead and stay here for a second and go ahead and save it. And remember, I created in data source, I've already created the extract, and it's including everything up to this particular moment, which was 10:59 when I was making this video. Okay, if I want to refresh up to the current view, I would hit refresh, and then I would say save, file save, or save as, book 1, replace it, and then I'm going to get this create extract once again, and then it's going to be setting it to the new data set. Okay, and the new data set now includes the calculation that we made. Okay, let's go back to Tableau Public now and take a look at what we have. So here's my visualization, and I have two options now. What I can do is I can go ahead and share this out, and I can either do it as an embed. Okay, so it's going to give me a whole script to embed it, or I can go ahead and just create a link. So in here, I'm just going to create a link, and I'm going to copy and paste that, and I'm going to log out of my Tableau Public to see what this looks like if I was just viewing this, if somebody had sent me the link, which is what we want. Okay, so here's what it looks like. It's interactive. Okay, so we can zoom in and out on the data, which is great. We can see the relative sizes that we put into calculation 1, but importantly, we're showing the magnitude. And we can see our little table right here that gives us a breakdown in terms of bins. Most of our earthquakes are between 4 and 4.5, as we can see that. So we can go ahead and download this as a package. So if somebody wants to work with your data, they can do that. We can view it as a full screen. Okay, we can also embed this link other places. So if we're putting together a demonstration of the data in another location, we can do that. And importantly, we can share this out. Okay, so for this particular assignment, for my class, we'll be actually just saving this. So this is what you want. You want to get the link from this current visualization that you made, and that will go into your template sheet for the assignment itself. So this brings us to the end of each one of 3 parts: getting the spatial data from USGS, organizing it, importing it, creating a table, and then doing a geospatial visualization dashboard format, and then publishing that as a Tableau public instance